People do stupid things on the 4th of July. Fireworks, booze, bad decisions. It's practically tradition. But the dumbest thing I ever did was say yes to a dare. It was meant to be harmless. Just one night. One night in an old Revolutionary War cemetery in a small New England town called Denswich Hollow. We were up visiting my cousin Sam, who lives in a colonial farmhouse built in 1781. Real creaky floorboards, lead glass windows, and oil lamps for decoration. The town still had cobblestone roads in parts. The locals all seemed to carry a little distrust in their eyes, like they knew something we didn't. It was the morning of the 4th when Sam brought up the cemetery. "You ever hear about old Denswich Burial Hill?" he asked, chewing on a toothpick. "No," I said. "Should I have?" He grinned. "It's where the town's original militia are buried, the ones that didn't make it back from the Battle of Bunker Hill. Whole row of them, all side by side. They say they walk on the night of July 4th. I rolled my eyes. "Of course they do." Sam leaned in. "They say they hate the living celebrating freedom when they died for it and were forgotten." By evening, after too many beers and shots of cheap whiskey, the dare came up. "Bet you won't sleep in there tonight," Sam said, pointing toward the woods behind his house. "What do I get if I do?" I asked, slurring slightly. "I'll give you my ATV, the Yamaha." He knew I loved that thing. "Done," I said, like an idiot. 11:42 p.m., Denswich Burial Hill Cemetery. The wrought iron gate squealed open like it hadn't moved in decades. My flashlight beam cut across the overgrown path, catching white headstones like broken teeth. Fog was beginning to roll in, rising low from the mossy ground like breath. I picked a spot on a stone bench just in front of the militia row. 13 stones, barely legible, carved with names like Lieutenant Ezekiel Marsh, Private Samuel Crane, and Sergeant Abram Dyer. I set up a small lantern and laid out my sleeping bag. I checked my phone. No service. I remember laughing to myself. "Happy birthday, America," I said out loud. My voice sounded small and wrong out there. That's when I noticed something odd. The stone for Lieutenant Ezekiel Marsh. It had moisture trickling from a hairline crack, thick and dark. I leaned in closer with my flashlight. It was blood. 12:15 a.m. The air shifted, dead still. No chirping insects, no wind in the trees, just silence. Then came the drums, soft at first, like someone far away beating on war drums, then closer, closer, rhythmic, violent. It felt like the ground trembled beneath me. I stood, heart in my throat. From the fog came footsteps, a single file of silhouettes emerging like ghosts from time. The 13 soldiers, their uniforms torn and stained, their eyes sunk in sockets glowing faintly red. Bayonets glinted under the moonlight. They didn't speak, not yet, but I felt their anger. I backed away. "I didn't mean disrespect," I stammered. It was a dare." Private Crane stepped forward. Half of his jaw was missing. When he spoke, it was wet and gurgled. "You mock our sacrifice with sleep and laughter on the day we died." Sergeant Dyer's head hung low, but his neck twisted unnaturally as he looked up. "The nation we bled for rots with fireworks and cheap drink." Lieutenant Marsh raised his musket. Not aimed, just raised. Then they vanished. 12:33 a.m. I thought I imagined it, that maybe I'd passed out and dreamt the whole thing. But when I sat back down, something shifted beneath me. The bench cracked and screamed, not creaked, screamed. I jumped up. The stone crumbled, revealing a skeletal face embedded in its base, eyes wide and mouth gaping. The air smelled like sulfur and soil. Then The ground split open in a straight line, tracing across the 13 graves. Hands emerged, hands with broken fingernails and ancient wedding rings. Some held rusted rifles, others clutched flags. They began to drag themselves up, slow, angry, incomplete. 12:47 a.m. I ran, tripped over a headstone. My flashlight shattered. I crawled, bleeding, toward the gate. But it was no longer there. The iron arch had been replaced by a stone gate with an emblem I'd never seen before. A skeletal eagle with its wings torn off, clutching a noose and a flintlock pistol. A voice called from behind me. "You will not leave until the debt is paid." I turned. The soldiers were assembled in formation now. Behind them, hundreds of figures emerged from the mist. Women with bullet holes in their skulls, children missing limbs, men burned black as charcoal, all long dead, all angry. A woman in a bonnet and scorched dress stepped forward. "We died for liberty," she hissed, but found no peace. 1:03 a.m. The celebration began, but not the kind you want. Cannons fired in the distance. Real ones. The sound shook my bones. Red flares lit the sky, but they weren't fireworks. They were fireballs. Screaming souls spiraled inside them like meteors. One landed near me, and a burning corpse crawled from the crater, its skin sloughing off in molten sheets. This wasn't a graveyard anymore. It was a battlefield, and I was on the losing side. 1:30 a.m. I hid in a crypt, my back against the cold marble of a forgotten judge named Nathaniel Pritchard. He watched me with hollow eyes from the mural on the wall. "I sentenced many to die," his ghost whispered from the shadows. "But I never imagined I'd be buried beside the damned." Outside, the soldiers sang, a war hymn, low, monotonous, a dirge in an ancient tongue I didn't understand. Then the door to the crypt opened on its own. Lieutenant Marsh stood there. He extended his hand. "You are chosen," he said, "to carry our story." "No," I muttered. "Please." But his hand touched my forehead, and my body burned with a cold so deep it froze my spine from the inside. I don't remember leaving, but I woke up on the edge of Sam's property as the sun rose, covered in dirt and blood and soot. My phone was melted. My shoes were gone. I could barely breathe. Sam was there, pale and wide-eyed. "What the hell happened?" he asked. I couldn't answer. I still can't, because they followed me. Every year since, on the night of July 4th, I hear the drums. Even hundreds of miles away, I see bayonets glint in the dark corners of my room. I smell gunpowder and blood, and I know. Next time, they won't let me leave. Don't mock the dead on the day they died for you, because some of them are still waiting for justice, and they're very, very angry. The last customers of the night always made me nervous. I was closing up Benny's Roadside Grill, an aging 2-story shack along Route 9, the kind of place truckers stop at for burnt coffee and chili dogs they'll regret in an hour. We had a red, white, and blue banner strung across the roof, and a giant inflatable eagle swaying over the parking lot like it was half drunk on freedom. The air stank of gunpowder and overcooked fries. Fireworks from the town park 2 miles away lit up the sky in loud, crackling bursts that rattled the windows. I was alone. Miranda had left early. Her kid was sick or something. Benny had said, "You're a grown man, Kyle. You can handle closing on the 4th. Just lock the door behind you." Yeah, I was handling it just fine. Until they pulled in. The van rolled up around 10:45 p.m. Big, matte black, lifted suspension, no windows in the back. It looked more like a tactical response vehicle than something someone would take to a burger joint. I heard it before I saw it. Deep engine growl, heavy tires crunching the gravel out front. 3 guys hopped out, mid-30s, beards like they were grown for intimidation, not fashion. All of them wore flag-themed tank tops, stars, stripes, red, white, blue mesh trucker caps. One had a rattlesnake, "Don't tread on me" flag tied around his shoulders like a cape. Their skin was sunburnt, greasy with sweat, and their eyes were off. Dead eyes, like they weren't totally there. One of them came up to the counter and slapped the bell like he owned the place. "You still serving?" he asked. His voice was syrupy sweet but tight, like he was barely holding something in. "Yeah," I said. "Kitchen's open another 15. He grinned with teeth that didn't match his voice. "Perfect. Got some hungry patriots here." I noticed the other 2 men standing beside the van. One of them was watching me. Not the menu, not the fireworks overhead, me. Just locked in. I tried not to look back, but something pulled my eyes to the van. The rear doors were shut tight, but there was a faint smudge near the handle, like a handprint, smudged and streaked, too small to be one of theirs. "Just burgers?" I asked, pen shaking in my hand. "6 double bacon cheeseburgers," the talker said. "Fries, large, and some of them pickles." "Drinks?" He leaned closer, his breath sharp with beer and chew spit. "You got milkshakes?" "Strawberry and chocolate." He nodded slow. "Chocolate. 6 of those too. All large. Don't skimp." I turned to punch in the order, forcing my hands not to tremble. Behind me, the fryer crackled. Outside, fireworks bloomed like blood in the sky. I could hear the 3 of them muttering, laughing low. Something about the cargo. Something about keeping them quiet. My skin crawled. I glanced out again. The van rocked slightly. Just once. Enough to notice. Enough to know it wasn't the wind. I wanted to say something, wanted to call the cops. But call them with what? Some guys acting weird and eating too many burgers? The talker leaned back over the counter. "Hey," he said, "you got a bathroom?" "Out back," I told him, "but the door sticks." He grinned and waved for the one with the cape. The cape guy strutted outside, but the one watching me didn't move. His eyes never blinked. The food was nearly done. I could smell the grease, the salt, the hot meat, but beneath it, something else, like copper, like blood. I slid the bags across the counter. "All set," I said, barely able to get the words out. The talker handed me a wad of cash without looking. "Keep the change," he said. "Happy 4th, brother." Cape guy came back, face flushed, and gave a sharp nod. I couldn't tell if he even went to the bathroom. They grabbed the food, laughing again. But before they turned, the last one, the quiet one, the one who'd never taken his eyes off me, walked up to the counter. He leaned forward and whispered, "Don't follow us." Then he smiled. Not a friendly smile, a knowing smile, like he'd seen my curiosity, like he could smell my fear. They piled into the van. The engine growled back to life, and they reversed slowly, taillights bathing the gravel in red. I stood there, frozen, heart pounding in my chest like a drumline. And just before the van turned onto the road, I heard it, screaming, muffled, desperate, short-lived. From the back of the van, I stepped outside, brain screaming at me to memorize the plate. But there wasn't one, just a sticker of a coiled snake and the words, "Live free or die." They disappeared into the night, fireworks cracking overhead like gunshots. I called the cops, tried to explain what I saw, what I thought I heard. They took a report, said they'd keep an eye out. That was it. No one ever followed up, 2 days later, I checked the news. A missing persons report. 3 teenage girls vanished from a fireworks display in a neighboring town. Last seen walking toward a parking lot. No witnesses. Their photos made my stomach drop. One of them had braces. Another had a birthmark under her eye. The third wore a hoodie with the words "Girls Rule" printed across the front. I don't know if they were in that van. I can't prove anything, but I know what I heard. And every 4th of July since, when the sky lights up with noise and fire, I think of those girls. I think of that van. I think of those dead-eyed men who wrapped themselves in flags and left a trail of screams behind. And I wonder if they ever stopped, or if somewhere else, under the cover of fireworks and freedom, they're still driving, still hunting, still celebrating. It started like any other hot July day. Humid, thick air hanging over the school parking lot as we loaded our instruments into the buses. I was a junior at Fairbanks Regional High, first chair trumpet in our marching band. We were all psyched out of our minds. This was our big moment, playing the Star-Spangled Banner at the start of a Major League Baseball game. Red Sox versus Yankees, no less. It was the kind of thing that makes your college application shine. But looking back, there were signs something was wrong. The first thing was the uniform. Our band director, Mr. Halverson, brought out these old-fashioned red and blue tunics with gold piping. They looked like they belonged in a colonial reenactment. No one remembered ordering them, and Halverson claimed the stadium requested them for patriotic effect. Still, they were thick wool, hot and scratchy, and none of us were happy about sweating through them in 90-degree heat. Then there was the bus ride. Some of us noticed weird interference on our phones, static, garbled voices that didn't make sense. One kid, Marcus from percussion, swore his GPS glitched and showed our bus driving straight into the ocean. We laughed, said it was probably a prank app. But it stuck in my mind. The game was at Fenway Park, historic, packed, electric. Fireworks burst overhead as we stood on the field's edge, instruments raised. We were supposed to play during the anthem, right before the ceremonial flyover. I had never seen the stadium that full, but something was off with the crowd. Not all of them were cheering. In the upper decks, beyond the center field bleachers, I could see them, figures standing motionless, pale, still. And then I realized they weren't wearing baseball caps or Red Sox gear. They wore tricorn hats, blue coats, tattered, dirty canvas. I blinked. Then the cue hit. The drumline rolled, and I lifted my trumpet. We began the anthem. The crowd sang with us, except those pale figures didn't. They just stood there, silent. Then came the second verse. The second verse isn't usually played at games, but our sheet music included it. On the shore, dimly seen through the mists of the deep. I played it like I was supposed to, and that's when the lights dimmed. No warning, not a flicker, just gone. The entire stadium went dark. The only lights were from torches that appeared in the hands of the pale men in the stands. Screams broke out. People started running. But the weird thing, the stadium staff did nothing, like they were frozen in place. Suddenly, I couldn't move my feet. I looked down. My legs were buried in the ground. Not dirt, mud, thick and cold, pulling me in like a bog. All around me, band members were stuck too, frozen mid-note, their eyes wide with terror. Some of them screamed. The rest of us just kept playing, unable to stop. The crowd was gone. In their place stood an army, hundreds of them. Revolutionary War soldiers, bloody, spectral, gaunt. Their faces were gray and lifeless, uniforms shredded by cannon fire, limbs missing. One dragged a saber along the railing, sparks flying with each scrape. Another limped toward the field, holding a musket, the barrel still smoking. "Keep playing," Halverson shouted from somewhere. "Don't stop." But his voice was wrong. It was deeper, older. The ghost soldiers marched onto the field. We couldn't stop playing. Our hands moved on their own. I watched as Marcus, who'd dropped his sticks, began to bleed from his eyes. The snare drum played anyway. The sticks floated above it like invisible hands gripped them. I saw Haley, the flutist, try to scream as her flute jammed itself into her mouth, slicing her lips. But her cheeks puffed, and the sound came anyway, flute notes bending unnaturally into minor keys, like a funeral dirge wearing a patriotic mask. Suddenly, they were all around me. The soldiers didn't speak, they just stared. Their eye sockets were empty, but I felt watched. One stepped close, too close. He raised a musket and saluted me. That's when I saw it, a deep hole in his chest where his heart should have been. Burned through. You could see the bleachers behind him, warped through the ghost flesh. He whispered, voice like wind through a crypt. "We never stood for this anthem. Not the king's song, not the tyrant's tune." I don't know how, but I managed to stop playing. That's when everything changed. The others, those still locked in the melody, began to burn, not with fire, with light. A pale blue glow that poured from their eyes and mouths as their bodies disintegrated. Their instruments hit the ground one by one with metallic clatters. Then the soldiers turned. They walked out, single file, silent, into the air, into nothing. One moment, they were there. The next, just a breeze and the echo of drums. And then the lights came back. The field was empty. The crowd returned, confused, stunned. Phones out, asking why the anthem stopped midway. No one remembered. No one saw them, except me. They found Marcus's drum on the mound, Haley's flute on the dugout. No blood, no trace, just gone. 4 of us never made it back to the bus. Police called it a disappearance. The school called it a tragedy. But I know better. I still have the trumpet. I still hear the song in my head, twisting, changing like it's alive. And at night, I dream of the crowd in blue coats. Every 4th of July, I hear them marching. And sometimes, they stop in front of my house.